Welcome to Best in Class. My name is AJ Madden. I'd like to welcome someone who has had a major positive impact on both my life and my career, my coach and mentor, Dr. Alan Weiss. His consulting firm, Summit Consulting Group, has attracted clients such as Merck, Hewlett-Packard, GE, Mercedes-Benz, the Federal Reserve, the New York Times Corporation, Toyota, and over 500 leading organizations. Alan has a Ph.D. in psychology and is also an inductee into the Professional Speaking Hall of Fame. He has written over 500 articles and 60 books. That's right, I said 60 books, including his bestseller, $1 Million Consulting, now in its 30th year and 6th edition. His books have been on the curricula at Villanova, Temple University, and the Wharton School of Business and have been translated into 15 languages. His career has taken him to 60 countries and 49 states. He is the recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award of the American Press Institute, the first ever for a non-journalist. Alan is married to the lovely Maria for 52 years, and they have 2 children and twin granddaughters. They reside in East Greenwich, Rhode Island with their dogs Coco and Bentley, a white German Shepherd. Alan, welcome to Best in Class. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, AJ. Happy to do this.
Excellent. Excellent. If you're ready to jump in, we can get started.
Sure.
You have been called the contrarian, which is one of my favorite things about you. And I'm going to share the definition of a contrarian. A contrarian is a person who opposes or rejects popular opinion. And in my experience, Alan has some incredibly useful contrarian philosophies that can help us all find more success and confidence and happiness. And I'd love to go over some of these with you, some of my favorites I've learned from you over the years.
Okay.
The first is actually a story about how you went out on your own after you were fired. And there's some great lessons in here about buying a $2,000 suit or multiple and your approach after you were fired. Can you share that with the audience?
Well, I was fired after just 15 months with a company. I was the CEO of a small consulting firm, and I decided I would go out on my own, never be fired by a moron before. The owner and I just, hated each other. But I also decided that this is a relationship business, and I would charge only based on value, not for time, not for numbers of people, not for seats and things like that. And I also realized that if I were going to see corporate buyers who would accept those conditions, I couldn't walk in rumpled. I couldn't walk in frayed clothing. And so I bought the suit you talked about. I had limos take me from airports to meetings and vice versa. And I flew first class. And my wife said, you're out of work. We didn't have a whole lot in the savings account. I said, look, this will be made up for. One sale makes up for all of this. And so I would walk into a meeting in a buyer's office, refreshed. I hadn't been lost. Somebody else was driving. And I wasn't perspired from running upstairs or, desperately trying to make a meeting. And it made a big difference.
Can you can you share with the audience how it made you feel to fly in the limousine and wear the suits and how that maybe affected your performance?
Well, when you treat yourself well, you feel better about yourself. It's as simple as that. I mean, anybody who's ever flown in a cramped coach compartment on an airplane for over an hour, and I had to do that once for 11 hours, knows that you feel you're just at the subject of the fates. You're not in control of your own life for that period. So it's important, even today, one of the big problems is people feel they don't have power. They feel they don't have control over their lives anymore, and their esteem suffers. So it's very important to walk into an office and feel as if you're a peer of the buyer. And that's what I did. It was a peer-to-peer relationship, peer-to-peer conversation.
Can you talk about never subordinating?
Well, you can't be obsequious. You can't be an employee. You have to be a peer. And so there are things that you can agree with. There are things you need to push back on. And there are certain behaviors that are acceptable. I mean, we all forget things. We make a wrong note in our calendars. But there are certain things that you don't forgive, constantly rescheduling meetings, canceling them at the last minute, not returning calls and so forth. Today it's called ghosting. Back then we called it not returning calls. And so you have to be comfortable in your own skin. It's as simple as that.
And you touched on self-esteem there, and I believe you're one of the best experts in the world at helping people improve their self-esteem. You've got so many great things to share about that. Here's three things you had talked about before in terms of building self-esteem: positive self-talk, constantly building your skill set, and getting out and practicing. Can you talk about that or anything else you'd like to discuss in terms of how someone can improve their self-esteem personally or professionally?
Well, your self-esteem should be constant. It can't be as high as your last victory or as low as your last defeat. And we all have victories and defeats. It's got to be constant. So self-esteem is a matter of worth. So even if you don't get a sale, the question is, are you still a worthy person? And I contend that you are. I contend that I am. So the metric is not whether you get the business. The metric is who you are and how you handle life. Here's a technique that I have found very, very important as I've coached people, and that is you isolate negatives and you generalize positives. And so if you don't get a sale, which is a negative, you say, at this time, in this place, with this person, I didn't get the business. You don't say I'm a lousy marketer. If you do get the business, you don't say, oh, I got lucky. You say, I'm a really outstanding marketer. And if you don't believe that, if you think about kids, if somebody misses a kick on the playing field and you say, you know, you're really awkward, you're not very good, which is a generalization, that kid is going to shy away from playing sports. But if you say in an isolated manner, nobody could have made that kick, it was too difficult. Now the kid is saying, yeah, it was just that one time. If a kid gets 100 in a history test, you don't say you're lucky. You say, hey, you're a scholar. So we can treat our children that way and give them the right values as they grow. We can treat our clients that way, our friends, our colleagues that way. And that's what self-esteem is about. It's about being a worthy person and not reliant on what happened this morning or yesterday.
And when you talked about focusing on what we do well, you've talked about substantive affirmations before. And specifically, here's what I did well today. And then also, here's what I'm going to do well today. Can you talk about that daily process or practice?
Yeah, it's a very simple technique where, you know, before you go to bed, you say, what are three things I did really well today? They could be personal or professional, but you remind yourself that you did things well. In the morning, you get up and you say, what are three things I'm going to do really well today, whether it's personal or professional? And that enables you to focus on the positive, because we tend to default to the negative. We tend to say, God, I meant to get that done. I didn't get it done, you know, or I could have done that better, or I forgot to do this. So our default position is negative, and that colors how we look at things. It affects our behaviors. So I think that we have the power to remain positive. Positive self-talk, positive psychology over the past decade or more, I think has been very effective.
We covered self-esteem. How about self-confidence? You've talked about the way to build your confidence is to never run away. If you have a fear, walk into it. Can you share that, your philosophy towards that?
Well, we have to face our fears. And, you know, I'm like this, and I know a lot of people who are, you know, I was afraid to go on roller coasters. When I finally went on one, kicking and screaming, I thought it was so great. I looked them, wherever I went, I looked for them. The same thing with flying. I mean, but you overcome these things slowly. And so therapists will take somebody who's afraid to fly and put them on a short flight and then a little longer flight. You know, if you're afraid of the water, you go in up to your knees first before you go in and try to swim. And so we have to acclimate ourselves. And the way to be confident is not to fear there are monsters under the bed. You know, when you're a kid, you're afraid there are monsters under the bed. Now, if you look under there, you don't see a monster. The fact is that when you're not looking under there, there could be a monster there. We don't know, but the monster hasn't hurt you in all those years. Monster never hurt you. So we have to face our fears, but in a more modern and contemporary sense, people say things like, I have writer's block, I can't write. You know, I'm overwhelmed. I'm afraid of public speaking. These are all myths. I mean, these aren't real. This is about simply not facing your fear.
Oh, brilliant. No guilt, no fear, no peer. One of my favorite mantras. Can you explain that one?
I was doing one of my thought leadership courses, and one of my best clients, really successful woman, said to me, you know, listen, what's really behind all this? How would you state your personal philosophy? And I thought about it for a few seconds, and I said, well, you know, no guilt, no fear, no peer. Guilt and fear and stress, for that matter, mask talent. they sap your energy, they sap your strength. So instead of going to building yourself up, they go to knocking you down. And I'm not intimidated by people. You know, when people say, hey, you intimidate me, that's a strange thing to say, because no one intimidates someone else. You allow yourself to be intimidated. Just like you can't motivate someone else. Motivation is intrinsic. And so people have to motivate themselves, not rely on, you know, walking over hot coals or some nonsense like that. And so no guilt, no fear, no peer. It means that when I walk into a room, I own it. There could be 2 people in the room or 200 people in the room, but I own it. Prove to me I don't. Now, I know that might sound arrogant, but the fact is that that's what gives you tremendous presence, and people feel that. And they understand that you are a worthy person. So in my definition of confidence is the honest to God belief you can help others. My definition of arrogance is the honest to God belief you have nothing left to learn yourself. And my definition of smugness is arrogance without any talent. And so sometimes I skate right up to the line between confidence and arrogance, but that's okay. That's where you should be. There's no room for humility in these professions. Humility is not degrading yourself, denigrating yourself. Humility is understanding that other people have worth too. If you want to understand humility that way, then there's plenty of room for it, but not degrading your own talents.
Can you talk about assuming permission, that most people don't have power taken away from them? They give it up.
Yeah, people, especially in this post-pandemic world, they see what the government's done. They see what's happening, you know, abroad. They look at social and economic and technological and demographic trends that are outside their control. And so they give power up. They give up control because they don't feel they have any. And it's just a random walk after that. And we have a lot of control. We have a lot of power. You know, I wrote a book called 3 and More about people getting older and why you should never retire. It doesn't mean you have to stay at the same job, but you shouldn't retire. And especially as you get older, people expect you to give up power, and we cede that power, CEDE, we give it away just because we're getting older. But the fact is, you know, not everybody gets older has dementia. Not everybody gets older is senile. And consequently, we're missing out on a lot of great talent. And so the key here is to understand what your power is and try to build it, not erode it, to understand what your control is and try to use it, not give it away.
Can you talk about, if you want to be someone, you have to start acting that way now, and why that's important?
We all have beliefs, and the beliefs create attitude. So if I believe as a leader that our customers are very important, my attitude will be, I intend to take care of our customers whenever I can. And that is manifest in our behaviors. And so if somebody were to say to me, hey, boss, there's a customer on the phone and she's not happy, I'll say, fine, put it on my line. I'll take it right away. That's a consistent belief, attitude, and manifestation behavior. However, if I believe that clients get in the way, customers are a pain in the neck, you know, they don't know what they don't know, and I've had it. My attitude is going to be to try to stay away from them. And so when one of my people says, hey, boss, there's a customer on the phone who's unhappy, I say, well, give it to my assistant. Now, if we've got hanging on the walls slogans that say the customer is our most important asset, and I am saying as a leader, the vibe I'm giving off is I don't want to talk to customers, that's called cognitive dissonance. And I'm not walking the talk. I had a client, a huge hospital, and they had these signs on the walls, our basic values. And the fourth one down, it's always the fourth one down, is we respect our employees. And right in front of these signs, you could see managers ruthlessly beating employees, right? And so the CEO says to me, I can't understand it. We have these signs all over the place, but morale is low. I said, Bill, do you think people believe what they read on the walls or what they see in the halls? Nobody believes what they are told or what they read in organizations. They only believe what they see. You know, there's an old phrase, the beatings will stop as soon as motivation improves, right? So we don't understand. We have to walk the talk and talk the walk. That's what consistent leadership is about.
Oh, brilliant. You've talked about the power of coaching. And if you look at people in sports and entertainment, academia, business, the best people are the most open to being coached. Can you share some philosophy on that?
Yeah, coaching is a sign of strength. Accepting coaching is a sign of strength. And if you look at the best of the best, if you look at Michael Jordan in basketball, or Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods in golf, or whomever you need. I mean, a great entertainer like Sinatra or Streisand, all of them have used coaches, and they've used coaches because they understand they can always get better. And their ego is strong enough not to have to be put in the position where, gee, I'm using a coach because I'm not good enough. Au contraire, they're using a coach because they are so good and they want to get still better. And I find that people who eschew coaching are people who are afraid. They have low self-esteem. They're afraid of being found out. They feel like imposters, so they don't want a coach to point out areas of improvement because they feel they're imposters, and these are areas of great weakness.
Mm. Can you talk about, if you can't improve something in 30 days, get a coach?
Well, I think if you can't improve something either personally or professionally in 30 days, you need help. If you're legitimately trying to improve it. So whether it's, I don't know, painting the garage, or it's making effective requests for referrals, if you can't do that in 30 days, there's something you're missing and you need an outsider. Now, if you get the outsider, if you get a really good coach, and you still can't get the garage painted in 90 days, and you can't get a referral in 90 days, then you need to get into another line of business.
I see. And you've also talked about never accept coaching or advice from anyone who hasn't done what you seek to do. Why is that important?
Well, because there's too many people who claim they're coaches and all they do is coach. They've never done anything. And so, when I tell people, here's how to write a book, I've written 60 books. When I tell people, here's how to get a Fortune 500 client, I've gotten plenty of them. I wouldn't tell anybody how to sing better because I can't sing. And so if you want to ski, and by the way, nobody ever learned to ski by reading a book, right? You need a coach. If you want to learn to ski, you don't get somebody who sits in the chalet drinking brandy and says, when you go up there in the morning, here's what I want you to do. You get somebody who goes up there with you in the morning and is 6 yards ahead of you and shows how to bend his knees and how you traverse the mountain, and you copy what that person's doing. So you want people, now they don't have to do it as well as you might. In other words, if Tiger Woods had a coach, which he did, the coach needn't have been as good or better a player than Tiger Woods, but the coach would have been an excellent golfer and could identify what was wrong with the swing or what was wrong with how Woods was playing the course. Caddies are excellent golf coaches, but the caddies aren't the championship golfers, but they've really been there and done that.
Oh, that's an important distinction. Either have done it yourself successfully and be able to convey it, or have been able to convey it successfully so others can get a high level of success, correct?
Right, but the conveyance has to be based on an experiential history. And so the caddy, who might never have won a golf championship, has played golf and has gone around a course 1,000 times with golfers, giving them advice and watching the results of that advice being followed and knowing how to adjust it and fine tune it. So when I say be there and done that, I'm talking about hands-on, on-site, experiential knowledge.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Can you talk about treating yourself well after a loss, and why maybe that's important for someone who might lack self-compassion, who's too hard on themselves? Why should they treat themselves well after a loss?
Well, I talk all the time about people who are refugees from large companies, and most of us are. We've left large companies, gone on our own. But the trouble is now we have tougher bosses, and we're way too hard on ourselves. And so, you have to treat yourself well. Otherwise, nobody else is going to. You can't sit around and mope and hope somebody will come along and, take your hand. And so you have to understand it's just part of life. And, one of my favorite phrases is that pain is inescapable, but suffering is voluntary. And so we all suffer pain. We suffer losses. We suffer disappointment. We suffer betrayal, you name it. But the degree to which we want to suffer is up to us. And so, the major religions have formal times of suffering or grievance or formal times of atonement, but they recognize that it should be limited to certain times and then get on with your life. But some people become lifelong sufferers. They wallow in suffering. And my contention is we have to treat ourselves way better than that.
Okay, that makes sense. Any other tips for someone who lacks self-compassion, who's too hard on themselves?
Well, ask yourself what the good deeds are that you've done, and have friends, a spouse, a partner, close friends, colleagues in an association who can help you identify them. I wrote a book called $1 Million Coaching once, and I opened the book by asking, did anyone ever approach you in your lifetime and say, they need your advice on something? And did you give it? And were they improved? And the answer, if the answer to those 2 questions is yes, congratulations, you're a coach. You don't need a certificate from some, coaching university, who certifies the certifiers. All you have to do is recognize the fact that indeed you've coached others, indeed you've helped others, and identify that and remind yourself of it.
And that also ties back into your point about substantive affirmations, about reminding yourself at the end of the day what you did well, correct?
Yeah. Like I said, we default too much to the negative. We remind ourselves of what we've done poorly, what we've missed. And we're so afraid that somebody will call us arrogant that we don't focus sufficiently on our victories.
And this is why, again, I believe you're one of the best in the world, because what you're talking about in terms of self-esteem, self-compassion, self-confidence mindset can absolutely change people's lives if they stop and listen to what you said there. It's, I've seen it with my own eyes. I've experienced it. If you just listen to what Alan's saying here today and you apply it where needed, you will change your life. You absolutely will change it for the better. Can you talk about how we create our own reality? You touched on this before in terms of what we believe, what we tell others, and how we tell them, and how we behave.
Well, we create our own reality by by determining what do we pay attention to, whom do we with whom do we interact, and I think too often, especially in an age of social media, we allow ourselves to be impacted by other people's opinions and not the facts, and if we're too sensitive to unsolicited feedback, we become a ping pong ball and we keep getting batted over the table, and we're not leading our own lives. And that goes back to what you talked about earlier, which is surrendering control, surrendering power. So we have to understand how we're going to get our input, how we're going to get our news, how we're going to get our stimuli from the outside world, and make sure we control that.
Can you talk about ignoring unsolicited feedback? Ignore unsolicited feedback. Can you talk about that?
Well, unsolicited feedback is always for the sender. Solicited feedback, where you ask someone you respect to give you some feedback on what you've done, that's great. But unsolicited feedback, people just coming up to you and saying, listen, I have some critique. That's for the sender. And it's usually because, they don't feel as important as they think they should be. They're envious of your own success. They want to take you down a peg. And by the way, it's equally dangerous to have unsolicited feedback that's too positive. And I see this in a lot of associations where somebody gets up and makes a speech and the feedback is over the top positive when the speech was really lousy. That doesn't help them at all. But everybody wanted to feel good by giving positive feedback. So that's what I mean by it's for the sender. And you have to just ignore it, because otherwise it will ruin your life.
And then pay attention to the opinions and feedback from those you respect and admire. Solicit those.
That's right.
Oh, brilliant. Can you talk about, when you got fired, you can either get distraught or you can get angry. I think there's such a great lesson in this story.
Well, if you get fired and you start to feel sorry for yourself and you get distraught, you're not going to be in a position to make the kinds of decisions we need to make and that I made. But if you get angry, that's healthy anger. And anger, gets your adrenaline flowing. You want to take action. So as opposed to being distraught and sitting around moping, this adrenaline makes you get out and do things. And so I think it's important to be angry and to learn your lesson. I mean, some people were fired for good reason. They didn't apply themselves. They thought it was a sinecure. They thought it would be easier than it was. They were distracted. All right, so learn that you can't keep doing that. You have to change your habits. But some people are fired for no good reason. It's because the company wanted to save money, or the company wanted to put in, a family member or whatever it is. Well, recognize that too. It's not your fault, and move the hell on.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Can you talk about how every challenge is a game? How you look at every challenge, whether it's an objection, a confrontation, a conflict, how you look at it as a game?
Well, yeah, it's a chess game to me, because I think that language is everything. Language controls discussions, and discussions control relationships, and relationships control business. That's an immutable sequence. And so when somebody's objecting to something I said, it's a sign of interest. It's not a sign of disrespect. It's a sign of interest. And so I like to use the tools at my command, the words in my vocabulary, to try to change their mind, to try to reverse them. I call that the martial arts of language. Use the other person's momentum and turn it back on them. When one prospect said to me, "We've never hired a consultant in the history of this company, and I don't intend to change that," I said to him, "You'd be surprised at how many of my best clients started the conversation in the same way." So I changed the frame immediately. Instead of a frame where he doesn't use consultants, I reframed it to he's in party with his philosophy with a lot of people who use my help. And so, this is how you have to look at this. And it's why I call it a chess game. You have to choose the right words, make the right moves.
Instead of getting frustrated, instead of, fighting fire with fire, it's a whole different mentality towards life, business and life.
Well, your attitude has to be that I am here to improve the client's condition. I'm not in here to sell. I'm not here to make money. I'm not trying to take something. I'm trying to give something. What I'm trying to give is value. And therefore, that means that you should never be reluctant to keep going at it because you're trying to help people. If you're just trying to take their money, forget about it. Open a betting parlor.
Can you talk about the 1% solution?
Well, if you improve by 1% a day in 70 days, you're twice as good. You can do the math on any calculator. It doesn't take mammoth change. It doesn't take mammoth innovation. So small changes, incremental change at the rate of 1% a day make you 70% better in 70 days, but not enough people, not enough companies do that. So, I advise people to keep focusing on being a little better and doing a little better every day.
Can we discuss the more difficult the conversation, the more positive the outcome?
Well, if people are going to raise legitimate fears, they're going to raise legitimate objections, legitimate skepticism and cynicism, that's good. And so that's a difficult conversation. We don't think an outsider can help us. We don't think that you know enough about our business. These are legitimate concerns to raise. And if we're good at what we do, we can deal with them. So it's the critical conversations are always tough ones. I can't recall ever walking to a meeting where someone said immediately, "Alan, we'd like to use you immediately. Just send us an invoice. I don't care what it is." I mean, nobody says that. Even if they've heard good things about you, they don't say that. They say, "Tell me a little bit about how you think you can help us." So you can't be afraid of any conversation, but you have to have the tools, the words, to deal with them.
How about personally, in terms of difficult conversations, why it's important to have those personally?
Well, because it's like going to the dentist or getting divorced. In other words, there's a threshold principle, and it's this. People won't go to the dentist because they're afraid they'll get a needle in their gum and Novocaine or whatever it is, they'll get this pain. And so they'd rather put up with a long-term toothache. So they don't want the immediate pain, but they'll tolerate long-term pain. People feel a divorce is awful, and it is, I'm told. And so instead of getting one, they live with a long-term lousy relationship. And so we need to accept the pain, the difficult conversation, so that we can get by that and have a positive relationship.
Those are such perfect analogies. I've shared those with a few people already. That's, it just nails it. The dentist and the divorce, and why the short-term pain versus long-term pain. Oh, it's beautiful. When you're 80% ready, move. Can you talk about that? Why that's important?
I found that the last 20% you put into a speech, nobody listens to. Last 20% you put into an article or a book nobody reads. Last 20% you put into a meeting nobody discusses. You've got to move faster than that. Today, speed is as important as content. And if you wait until you're 100% ready to quote unquote perfection, you're never going to move at all. So I've determined 80% is good enough, and the rest you can change along the way. You fine tune along the way. But you've never been on a perfect airplane. You've never had a perfect meal. You've never been in a perfect auto. There's no such thing as perfection in those regards. Even most hospital operations are not perfect. And so 80% ready, that's good enough. Get moving.
Can we talk about the process and the discipline it takes to write over 60 books? You're absolutely one of you are the most prolific writer on consulting and really business in general and history. Can you talk about your daily, weekly habits, your process, and how that might apply to anyone's success? Because we have all walks of life here. We have doctors, we have teachers listening, we have business owners, we have high school students. But your process that you use to write so prolifically can be applied to really any goal.
Well, there's a difference between writing and writing a book. When I'm writing a book, I schedule it in my calendar. I write best in the morning. And so my books are generally 10 chapters, and they generally have, say, 5 subpoints in each chapter. And so four pages, 4 double-spaced pages represents a subpoint. So I try to sit down and write one subpoint every morning I have scheduled. Might be 3-4 times a week. And that's, you know, a quarter of the chapter, a fifth of the chapter, whatever it is. So 4 or 5 sittings like that, and I've got it done. It takes me about 30 or 40 minutes to write those 4 pages. I type at 60 words a minute. When I'm writing in general, oh, and by the way, and I write on trains and planes. I use a lot of my time flying or on trains to write. I'll read as well, and I'll play some Angry Birds, but I also make sure I write. Writing in general, though, you know, I do 4 or 5 columns a month. I do a podcast a week. I do a weekly newsletter. I do 5 weekly videos. I do a monthly video, yada, yada, yada. What my technical people figured out, I have, I don't know, 1,800 hits with my clients and prospects a year or something. And I just schedule, it's just, you know, you schedule these things. So for example, you and I are talking now on July 10th. By July, let's say 20th, I'll have all of my columns and recordings done for August.
So a key part of it is the scheduling and getting it done in the morning when you're most productive. Anything else there that could apply to any habit or goal?
Well, preparation's everything. You know, you can't just sit down and do something. You have to be prepared. So in a book, you have a table of contents you're probably following. In an article, you have a concept that you want to explain to people. If I'm doing a recording, even I do a minute with Alan every weekday, but even that minute, I have a note or two about what I want to cover. And so preparation is everything. People don't prepare adequately. Not only don't they prepare for a project or prepare for upset or defeat, they don't prepare for success.
Makes sense. Makes sense. You've gotten to the top of multiple fields. You become best in class. There's a documentary on Arnold Schwarzenegger that came out on Netflix recently. And he also got to the top of multiple fields as a bodybuilder, in politics, in the movies, in wealth. You did the same thing across multiple fields yourself. What would you say would be the key mindsets or habits that helped you to become best in class, you know, as a speaker, as an author, as a consultant, as a coach? What were some keys, would you say, overall?
Well, you have to be fearless. You can't worry about your ego. You can't worry about what people say. You have to be fearless and just walk in and do it. You have to be your own person, and you can't be, you know, the idea here is to be respected, not liked. This isn't about affection. So it doesn't really matter if people like you or not. What matters is if they respect you and if you're improving their condition. You know, if you want unconditional love, get a dog. As you mentioned, I have 2 dogs. You have to be resilient. You have to be able to bounce back, bounce forward. And so that when you do hit defeat, which we inevitably hit, you learn from it and you use that to move forward even more quickly. And so no matter what you're trying to do, whether it's write a book, get a job, enter a new field, make new friends, learn to play a sport, I don't care, whatever it is, you need to separate it into chunks, and then you need to apply the discipline, the self-discipline, to get it done. Because procrastination is a manifestation of fear. If you procrastinate, anybody listening to this, you're fearful. And you're fearful because, ironically, the fear of doing something and being critiqued for it as it being not good is worse than the fear of being critiqued for not getting it done at all. And that's why people procrastinate.
Oh, that's all extremely helpful. There's the blueprint, folks. I mean, Alan just laid it out, you know, what it takes in terms of mindsets and habits to get to the best in class in multiple disciplines, which is extremely rare. But he just laid out the principles and the mindsets and the habits it takes to get there. Any books you could recommend, Alan, in terms of personal development that you've read? I know you recommend Learn to Optimism by Dr. Martin Seligman, or any other books on mindset and habit, personal development that you could recommend to the audience?
Well, I'm not real big on self-help books. I try not to think of my books as self-help books, because self-help books assume the reader is damaged somehow, is lacking. But Marty Seligman's Learned Optimism is very good for positive self-talk. John Gardner wrote a book a long time ago called On Leadership, which is very good about leadership and what that means, really. I think that most of Peter Drucker's books are great, like Managing in Turbulent Times, The Effective Executive. There's a book by Andrea Gabor called The Capitalist Philosophers, which is really a short history of consulting, person by person. You know, Elton Mayo and Dorothy, I think, and Dorothy Parker Mallet, I think her name was, and you know, McClellan and Hertzberg and all these big figures in consulting. So those are the ones that come, you know, it's come to me most readily. But I think it's important that people read eclectically, that they read fiction, they read biographies, they read science fiction, they read history. I learn more from that than I do from business books.
Mm. Oh, excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you for all that. Maybe we can end with, unless there was there anything I didn't ask that I should have?
I never answered that question.
You know, oh, that's right. I've heard you say that before. You caught me there. You said the secret to a great career is to find something that you are great at and love doing, and then you make money from it.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, because look, there are three things that you need to be really, really successful. One is there has to be a market need for what you do, and you can create need, you know, if it doesn't exist. Then you have to have the skills to do it, and you can develop the skills if you need to. But then you have to have passion, because most of this kind of work is about rejection. It's about the difficult conversations you talked about earlier. And so when you have market need and you have the skills and you have the passion, you've got a strong brand at that intersection. That's where you build your brand. And so this can't be a hobby. You know, a lot of people open they love baking, so they open a donut shop, you know, but it's their hobby and they go out of business quickly. And the statistics on new businesses failing is astounding. And yet new businesses are the greatest producers of net new jobs in the country, you know, not large firms, small ones. So if you have passion about what you do, you're always energized. You're always up. You're always resilient. You take setbacks in stride. They don't knock you, you know, off stride. Because that passion is a constant fire. It's a constant source of motivation. So nothing's onerous. You know, and if you really like doing business and you believe you're helping people, you're not going to hesitate to call for referrals because you realize you're helping two people there. And it's like that. If you look at the great athletes and the great entertainers, they're passionate about what they do. Why shouldn't everybody be like that?
Mm. Oh, brilliant. Where can people find out more about Alan Weiss and how to work with you?
AlanWeiss.com, AlanWeiss.com. There are all kinds of free resources, text, audio, video, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's a suite of things you can sign up for where I can coach you in various ways, or you can get together with groups, or you can go to some either Zoom or live courses that I host.
Mm. And you coach and advise all kinds of paid experts, whether they want to be a speaker, a writer, a coach, consultant, and from all different disciplines, surgeons or doctors or lawyers or business executives. What are the categories of people that you've coached in terms of becoming a paid expert? And when I say paid expert, I mean a speaker, writer, consultant, coach, trusted advisor.
Well, I regard myself as coaching experts and coaching entrepreneurs. And in fact, 2 days from now, I'm going to have a leading surgeon from Boston here so that I can help her learn how to speak better because she's so good. She's been asked to make speeches all over the world about her specialty, but she's uncomfortable doing that. So I'm working with her. So I work with individuals, entrepreneurs and experts who realize that coaching is important if they want to get better.
Mm. And I can attest to it. It's some of the best time and money I've ever spent in terms of my career, my business, and my coaching consulting career. So I can't speak highly enough. Alan, thank you for the masterclass on what it takes to be best in class. I appreciate you.
I appreciate being here, AJ. Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
You too.